From the Hype HQ studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hypeman, the podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Nation, and I am the founder of Startup Hypeman. Fast-growing startups work with me because they want to become better storytellers. Whether that's for customers, investors, or a packed audience, they know that story is their ticket to stand out, stand apart, and change the game. And this podcast here is where I talk with entrepreneurs and leaders in the startup ecosystem, ranging from scale stage to early stage, as they share specific strategies that they have executed to stand out across three specific areas: sales, marketing, and people. Before we begin today's episode, remember you can head to startuphypeman.com and subscribe to the newsletter that doesn't suck. You'll get new podcast episodes and timely reads written by me, but also helpful articles from around the web and a notice of upcoming pitch competitions. All right, let's dive in and hear how today's guest is changing the game. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone from Paris, France, and currently residing in Paris, France, he is the founder and CEO of lemlist. Please welcome G Mobeche.
Love the intro, man.
He is Guillaume Mobeche, otherwise known as simply G. As I mentioned, the founder, the CEO of lemlist. What is lemlist? Well, they help you send cold emails that get replies. As they like to say, B2B does not have to stand for boring to boring. Lemlist tool powers sales teams, agencies, and B2B companies to personalize and automate their cold emails. They have over 10,000 customers in just a 3-year period. They have gone from $0 to $5 million in annual recurring revenue in that time period, scaling up to 35 team members. And here's the kicker of it all. They've done it all entirely bootstrapped. And today's conversation specifically, as we come to you with episode 7 of this season, is rejecting a $30 million investment offer. Now, G, usually my first question is, why is this on your mind? Why is this important to you? But I feel like it's kind of obvious why this would be on your mind if you rejected it. So I guess what I'll ask instead as a starter question is, given that the topic is rejecting a $30 million investment offer, the first thing I want to ask you with this as just a high level is, why?
Yeah, so essentially, like to give maybe a bit more context, before launching lemlist in the early days, I was having a chat with a friend and he was asking me, what's up? Told him about my startup. Then the first question he asked was, how much money have you raised from investors? And then I told him, but we haven't raised any. And then he said, in that case, you don't have a startup. So in the early days, for me, I was associating startup and at least the success of a startup to the amount of money you get from investors. So in the early days, I spent a lot of time with investors. And I guess after 1 month of being rejected, of people telling me it's a crowded market, it will never work out, we don't know you, etc., I just say, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to focus on my customers, try to make them as successful as possible, build the best product ever created, and just keep grinding. And eventually, after all that hyper growth we had in the last 3 years doing and scaling faster, than other startup and scale up that you would see in the media, I was like, it's crazy, because I met tons of Bootstrap founders who are actually in hyperscale mode, running their SaaS company, etc. But you would never heard about them in the media. So then I thought, we could do something a bit different because I also have a YouTube channel. So I was like, okay, I'm going to document a process where I will announce publicly that we're going to raise 20 million. It would be good because it will allow people to see, how does that work exactly, when you have a pitch, when you have an investors, what type of meetings, all these type of things. And eventually, once we get an offer, we just say no. And just to show, the word that you don't need millions to succeed, that, you can do it on your own without having to raise money from investors. And that on top of it, it's not the only definition of success and that you should consider other factors. So by doing this, it was pretty huge. We got featured in tons of press internationally. So it's pretty cool. And what I like the most, I think it's all these people messaging me saying, hey G, I was actually in the same spot thinking about raising or not, but after your like video, now I know that I want to focus on being like profitable. So I think it's good.
Well, we're going to dive a whole lot more into that story in today's conversation. Before we get there, let's learn more about you. I'm curious to know, this is kind of a rebel mindset in a way. I would say being an entrepreneur is its own form of rebel, but then turning down a lot of money is a rebel. When you think back to your childhood, were you a rebellious child?
Let's say, yeah, I was good to do things that I shouldn't, I would say. So yeah, essentially like I was a good student, but I didn't really like school a lot. So in class, I would say that I was very like agitative. Like I was the kind of kid at the back end of the course and talking a lot, making a lot of jokes. I was not super into class, but I always loved like learning new things. But I usually get bored whenever I was at school. But because of my parents, like didn't get any degree nor get like the type of education, because essentially my parents grew up in a farm before basically coming to Paris and basically like starting their 9-to-5 job. My dad like decided to take like 2 jobs, so my brother and I could basically have like a decent education. And for them, having a good education was about like becoming an engineer and study science. So that's what I did. And once I became an engineer, I was like, okay, I want to do business because I think it will give me the same like feeling of freedom that I was looking for. And freedom, it's not just like you're free and you do like you don't do anything, but you can just go. It's more about like doing the things you love, and essentially like that's how it started. I went to business school, then I launched my first business with my dad. It was total fail. So we launched like a t-shirt business. Since I was a biz guy, I was taking care of the business side of things, I would say. And my dad, he would do like printing on t-shirts. I was 100% sure that we would receive thousands of orders once the website will go live, because obviously everyone would like to buy my t-shirts. But in the end, they did not. We had like 6 orders or something. So it was pretty bad fail. But after that, I thought, like I couldn't find how to find customers for this business, but I'm sure I'm not the only one having this issue. So with a friend who was actually an expert in customer acquisition, we decided to launch an agency. I learned a lot from him. And then I started, running tons of cold email campaign, like sales prospecting campaigns, whether it's on LinkedIn, emails, or cold calling. And eventually I became like really good at it. And after, like generating, I would say like millions of dollars from companies we were having in our clients, I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to do it, for my own company. And that's when we launched lemlist with my 2 co-founders.
You mentioned during that story, you mentioned your parents. You said neither of them went to college. And you also mentioned that you were that person who was maybe agitating the teacher in the classroom. How do you think your parents would describe you, both as a child, and how would they describe you today if they were describing you to someone else?
I think like since my mom is Italian, she would say that I'm the most handsome and well-educated person in the whole world.
She wouldn't be an Italian mother if she didn't say that. That's for sure.
And for my dad, I think he would say that I would say like creative and smart individual. But yeah, it would be only compliments. So they're my parents. Obviously, they're not gonna say like bad stuff.
Well, of course. Yeah, of course. I'm just curious what, the way they might describe you or what qualities they might pick out. Tell me a little bit more about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in France. You've been there your whole life. You did mention that early in your journey, a friend thought you didn't have a real startup if you weren't raising money. But overall, can you just give us, I'm in the US, can you give me and all the listeners in the US an understanding of what's the general impression of entrepreneurship in France? I mean, the word is French itself. And what is the take on, startups there? What's the perception?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny because actually like we're based in France, but 80% of our customers are based in the US. But when it comes to like the startup ecosystem, I think it has been moving a lot in the last 5 years. When I started, being an entrepreneur was it was very risky, and people knew it was risky. So some of them were kind of, yeah, it's risky. You might be wasting time doing this because, you could get a really good job at a really good company, etc. But eventually, it started becoming sexy. Yeah, you're an entrepreneur, you're taking risks. It's amazing. It can pay off big, etc., etc. So I think now more and more startups and working in startups is becoming cool. I think we have this coming also, I would say, from TV shows like Silicon Valley, for example, where everyone was like, oh yeah, being in a startup is so cool, etc. But on top of it, I would say that the fact that we have more and more money from investors overall is also a good thing, because obviously whenever there is fundraising, there is something in the media and a lot of people talk about it, which I think it's good for the startup ecosystem because it shows more startup, more innovation, and this is great. What's the drawback about this is obviously they only talk about startup who fundraise, but there's always pros and cons in any system. But overall, right now, I think it's very dynamic. We see more and more companies developing really innovative solution, and we also have more fundings on different type of level. The government is funding a lot of startups, which I think is good, especially in some specific fields.
Okay, very interesting. Let's talk about lemlist and how you got to this point of raising a bunch of money and only to reject it. Now, you talked about the creation of lemlist was really out of, you were doing emails for other companies as an agency, and then you said, well, we could probably just create a software ourselves and sell it as sell an emailing software. So you get that. You ultimately, recently you get a $30 million investment across two different investors, and you reject it. Now, before we dig into more of that rejection story, I just want to walk through the journey of how you got there. So when you started lemlist, what was your initial strategy? Was it bootstrap or raise? And at what point did that conversation come up with the friend who said, oh, you don't have a real company unless you raise?
Yeah, so actually, in the early days of lemlist, I had my two co-founders, Vianney and Francois. We're a bit older, so I'm when we started lemlist, I was 26 or 27, and
now you're 30, and you're saying you're a bit older. Come on, kid.
No, I was saying Vianney and Francois, my two other co-founders, are older.
Okay,
so they're around 45 years old. So
okay.
not my grandparents, nor my parents, but a bit older.
Your brother, and, your older brothers.
Your older brother, I would say. And essentially, since they had a lot of experience and they are really, really good in tech, they were telling me okay, you're the CEO. You need to show us that you can bring business, and the first thing you have to do is to raise funds, So in the early days, because I was meeting with my friends and he was telling me this, and my two co-founders were telling me that, they wanted me to start fundraising. After 1 month of having them and my friends saying that you don't have a startup if you don't raise, I was like, okay, fuck it. Let's try doing this. Because in the meantime, they were developing the products, at least MVPs that I could sell. So in the meantime, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, try to pitch, try to see what's up with investors. But very quickly, I got bored of it, and I knew I was good at finding customers. So I was like, okay, let's do something else. Let's not focus on something that is, for me, a defocus on your business, and let's try to bring a lot of value. Actually, what came up was that I had onboarded already 1 or 2 person on the MVP, or I think it was maybe 5 people. And one guy, I helped him basically launch this campaign, and I knew that I had changed a lot of things in the wording, a lot of things in the way he was sending emails, explaining him the right methods on how to do cold email. And he sent me a message saying hey G, just wanted to thank you because I signed my first $20,000 contract. And then I was and it was basically hey, it's my agency, it's life-changing, etc., etc. And I was holy shit, this is what I want to do, this is, I want to be an entrepreneur for a moment like this. So then for me, it became clear, in the early days that we needed to be focused on the success of our customers, because if they were successful using lemlist, they would stay with us, and we would have created that very I would say a solid relationship. So essentially in the early days, I would say that first month and a half was when I was in between my co-founders and friends pushing me to fundraise. Then I had that message that just pushed me to keep focusing on customers. And eventually, we launched on Product Hunt in the very early days with our ugly beta. And we were like product of the day, which was like really great, drove us tons of signups, but the product was not good. So no retention at all. And eventually with the people who sticked, we just decided to build that relationship, keep focusing on them, doing more and more sales outreach myself just to close more customers. I would say the first 100 paying customers was me reaching out to them, and then it started building up more content, a community, and eventually get where we're at today.
Now, when you launch on Product Hunt, so you obviously get some users through that, but Product Hunt is not how you get to 10,000 customers, right? And I think oftentimes you even sacrifice paying customers just for free users on Product Hunt, or heavily discounted users anyways. So as you start to grow the company, is your customer acquisition method to start by using your own software to get meetings and ultimately talk to end customers?
Yeah, definitely. And I was also targeting I knew my competitors would target much bigger teams. So I would target smaller companies where I knew that I could reach out in a maybe in an easier way. So something that works really great actually when you do cold outreach is so you have several strategies when you launch, but first strategy is basically networking. So you're saying okay, I'm launching a SaaS. I've seen that you're also starting your own, so would love to exchange on tips on how you can grow and do X, Y, Z. Here's my background. Would you be open to chat? This works pretty well. And then during the chat, you can qualify and understand whether or not the person would need your software. Something that works also really well is basically doing interviews. So you chat to people saying let's say, I'd love to interview you or whatever on a specific topic because I'm writing let's say a roundup on a specific topic and I'm mentioning all experts. So people love to talk about themselves and love, this type of thing. So this worked really well to get insights on what people are doing, how they're using potentially your competitors, and whether or not you can understand what's missing and eventually, build it and then sell it to them. And all these things basically were allowing me, to get to meetings with people in an easier way, build relationship, and eventually, build that momentum of getting more user, more word of mouth, more referral. That's something also I'm amazed by how few people ask for it. It's you have someone who's using your products, and I feel very few salespeople or very few founders asking for referrals, when actually it's one sentence that can open you so many doors. Because if you ask people okay, who do you think my product could benefit in your network, it's for sure that they will have 2 to 3 person, and then you can say, okay, do you mind introing me to XYZ? And if that's okay, I can just send you the intro message, so you just have to copy paste it. So making people's life easy, sending the intro message, you just have to copy paste, and getting intros like this is one of the easiest way and nicest way to boost your word of mouth and getting into more meetings with potential customers. And
it's
again,
interesting you say that a lot of salespeople don't do that, because I historically have struggled to ask for referrals myself. And actually just last week, I did send an email to one of my clients, and I literally wrote in the email, I was like, I'm good at a lot of things, as you've seen from the work we've done together. I was like, one thing I am actually terrible, and I was just totally vulnerable. I was like, but one thing I have always been terrible at is asking for referrals. So here goes. And I said, do you know anyone in your network who you think I'd be able to help as well? And then he replied, and he was like, yeah, I can think of a few people. Let me get back to you in a few days on this.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's I understand why it's tough, because it's asking something from a client can feel you're asking too much. and it's not natural to do it.
That's what I've always felt, is it's almost like does it come off like the wrong way, or I'm like, I have this unfounded worry that there's something along the way maybe they like have not been happy with that they've never voiced, and now that I ask them for a referral, they're going to be like, well, you haven't done this thing, so why would I give you a referral?
No, I think, to be honest, like to me, it's all the essence of sales. So sales is about like helping people find a solution to their problem. If you're convinced that you're bringing a solution to a problem, then you should be, it's your mission to ask for referral, because your mission is to find more people with the same problem that you can help. And in the end, like if you ask referral to others, they should also be happy to intro you to their friends or network, because they would be like, oh, this guy or their product or their service, they really helped us out. And you should definitely look at it. And eventually they should feel good about doing that referral, because if you bring, like, for me, it's the same, like if I have someone who's doing an intro for a consultant on a specific topic because they worked with that person and they had like a 5x in ROI or whatever, I'm like, yeah, of course, I want to work with that person and I want the exact same result, So, yeah.
I think the key, and one more thing I want to say on this, I think the key is the timing of the ask. And I have been on the receiving end of some referral requests where the product or the service provider has not yet delivered any value to me. Like maybe I literally just signed a contract and they're like, hey, do you know anyone else who this would be good for? And I'm like, well, let me experience it first and then I can tell you that. And so I think that's part of it too, right? Being able to
definitely
time it the right way, where they've extracted some value out of your product before you go ask them, who else should we talk to, right?
Absolutely, yeah, 100% agree.
So I do want to cover if you have any other of these outreach strategies that you were initially doing. So you had networking, interviews, referrals, anything else that you were leveraging?
Yeah, obviously, like there is so these are, I would say, like the non-standard way of doing things that works really, really well, because very few people do it. And then you have like the more traditional way, which also in our case worked really well. It's, like you reach out to someone because you make the message about them, you try to connect with them on a meeting, and eventually once you get to the meeting, you're a bit more straightforward, saying that you had added your value proposition in the email, so they know what you're selling. And eventually, like if they tell you like, yeah, I'm not so sure cold emails work, I'm like, we're in a meeting together because of a cold email. And then they would be saying like, yeah, okay, I want to give it a try, Sure. So those are the things, like if you can use your product for acquisition, it's really great, just because, like by using your product, you're going to show to the person you reach out to that, like whatever you're doing is working.
Yeah. So you end up getting a lot of customers through these different methodologies. Again, as we said, in the first 3 years of business, you're over 10,000 customers. At what point did the investor conversation start to like come into play? And was it, oh, there's a growing company, investors are reaching out to us, or is it, we're growing now, so we should start reaching out to investors?
What do you mean, like for the final things we did with investors, or in the early?
I just mean, yeah, as you're growing this company, like unless I've got the story wrong here, I'm thinking it wasn't just all of a sudden one day you're like, well, we're going to go find $30 million, right? Like in this climb, were there conversations of, well, now it's time that we should think about raising money, or were you actually getting inbound interest from investors?
Yeah. So the truth is, I often take calls with investors just because I'm in very good terms with all the investors I've met, and I particularly like some of them because of their, like, the fact that they are smart, that they have like a bigger picture on the industry. So we exchange tips. Sometimes like they ask me about, what do you think about that company? And sometimes, I ask them like other tips on specific things in the market.
Well, so how did these relationships get developed, right? Because not every investor is going to a founder, really any founder, to say, what's your take on another company, unless that founder has successfully exited 3 or 4 times.
In our case, I would say like we document everything that we do. So we have a lot of articles. So we had our first article from 0 to 250,000 K ARR. Then it was from 0 to 1 million. then from 1 to 2 million, then from 2 to 4, etc. So we speak and document everything. So obviously, like, investors can go through our articles, see our metrics, and usually they want to reach out. So this kind of happen, and step by step, you know, like, I usually refuse, and because at some point it's just a matter of, you know, where you want to focus. In the early days, I was like, okay, you know, I can always take a call. It doesn't cost anything. But now my time is so valuable that I just don't want to take calls that I'm not sure that they will bring something, like, to either me, the company, or the team. And I think that's kind of how it went. We started receiving more and more messages from investors, but it was more like on a weekly basis. I would say that I would receive maybe 1 or 2 emails from investors. Sometimes it's just like their analysts. They saw an article about lemlist, so they're reaching out, etc. So yeah, that's the thing also. If it's an analyst or someone who's just you know, doing like data analysis or whatever,
the paperwork,
I just always reject. Not that I'm against them or whatever. It's just I know that they're trying to qualify me, and I don't want that. But if it's a partner that I know was invested in some very interesting and relevant company, and that they do the work to reach out for a very specific reason, then I'll be happy to have a chat, because I know that they have knowledge on the industry and that it's always some good and interactive exchange. But eventually, like, this whole idea of you know, like, doing this fundraising things, etc., like, came up with Nathan Latka, who's also like pretty well connected in the SaaS, like, software industry. And we were having a chat, and then, you know, he was telling me, yeah, you have like a Bootstrap company working amazingly well, growing like in hyperscale mode, so you don't need to raise funds, you know. And then I told him, yeah, like, the only reason why I would be happy to raise funds, it's just to get my article on TechCrunch. And then, you know, I said that laughing, and then he said, well, in that case, you just, you know, you just go to see a VC, and then you pay them like 5,000 grand to basically give you like a term sheet, and then you said no to it. And then when he said that, I was like, well, it's true that no one has ever like said no in public to any investors. And on top of that, you know, we love being transparent, like, it's part of our DNA. If you look at how do you do fundraising, there is nothing. You can't find like a pitch online where people are asking questions with investors. You can't find pretty much anything. Like, all the infos are coming from investors or founders, and it's not very accurate. You have either the case where it's like the founders that explains that they raised in 1 week, and here are the slides, but actually, like, the slides don't give you shit as an info. It's not transparent. Everything is blank. You can't see anything. Or on the other end, you have like the VC, who basically don't want to have too many people asking, so they're gonna just put like a massive list, and then it doesn't really make sense, you know. So I was like, okay, let's do things differently. Let's go in depth. Let's be super transparent and start this process.
Okay, so I want to ask you more about that process. Before I do, I just want to take a step back for a moment. And all this season on the show, we are featuring different companies in the Startup Hypeman portfolio, specifically featuring their elevator pitch using the Startup Hypeman proprietary Que PASA Elevator Pitch formula. Today, we are featuring Engagedly, an HR tech company. And so if you're not familiar with Engagedly, here's the story. If you are an HR leader and you have been operating in this world over the last year, then you've been buried in spreadsheets and paper documents trying to track goals, OKRs, and engagement of your employees. And what happens from there is there's this trickle-down effect of missteps in the process, having to chase managers for approval, and really reviews just being subjective. And that was at least partially tolerable in a pre-COVID world when everyone is in the same office. But in the remote work environment, it's kind of impossible. And as things transition into a hybrid work environment, it's not going to get any easier. So Engagedly helps HR leaders streamline and control their processes regardless of the physical environment. Organizations are using Engagedly every day for company-wide people enablement. So what that means is all of performance management lives on one platform, no missteps, no hunting down managers, and so forth. HR leaders really love it because they're not buried anymore, but more importantly, at an organization level, performance turns into something that happens for employees as opposed to happening to them. And you can learn more and get a demo by going to www.engagedly.com. Again, that's www.engagedly.com to access company-wide people enablement for your organization. Today, I am with Guillaume Mobeche, more affectionately known as just G, the co-founder and CEO of lemlist. And we're talking about how he and his company rejected a $30 million investment offer. And what we're going to get into right now is the real background behind that specific moment. So, G, before the break, you said, well, you had this idea around how, what if we could bring transparency into this investment process? And your conversation with Nathan Lotka was kind of like the ceiling where he said, well, if you want to get in TechCrunch, just pay an investor $5,000 to write you a term sheet and reject that. And you were like, okay, well, maybe there's something there. Now, I don't think you ended up actually paying an investor to give you a term sheet. I think you actually got a term sheet. So take us to that, like the formation of this process. Who did you reach out to first, and how did this come together?
Yeah, so truth is, no, yeah, we didn't pay anything because we are like a friendship bastard. So I was like, I need to find, I need to find like a more creative way to do this. Yeah. So essentially, like I was basically like in I think it was in September. Roxane Varza, who's the CEO of Station F, which is like the biggest French incubator. She was basically like messaging me saying that a US-based investor was very interested in investing in lemlist, or at least like meeting with me. And she asked me if she could make an intro. So I said, yeah, of course. And that woman, Pascal, basically like messaged me, and I really liked her approach because she was saying like, my husband is working in growth for XYZ companies, and he really loves lemlist. He's been using it like every single day. So I was like, okay, you're French. I'm French, but based in the US. We need to have a chat and see what's up, you know? And we had like a really, really good feeling. This type of chat, you know, I was mentioning, where basically like it's not like a VC asking you for all your numbers and then like nothing in return. She was really into, okay, who can I do intro? What do you need exactly? Like she was really helpful, and I was really surprised and really liked it. So
now, did you take this meeting and were you in this conversation knowing in the back of your head, I'm going to reject whatever I get? Or at this point, were you still thinking like, hey, this is a good path to pursue?
At this point, I didn't even know that we were going to say no and organize all these type of things. Or it was it was back in September. And
so it was very organic at this point.
Yeah, very organic. But then, you know, in December, when I was like, okay, maybe, you know, it's time like that we start our fundraising series. And eventually like get a meeting with an investor, try to see like the behind the scenes of how exactly does a pitch work, what type of question do you get asked, and all these type of things. I was like, who could I do this with? And then I was like, okay, I'm sure like Pascal, she was very into lemlist back in the days. So I asked her, you know, like, hey Pascal, we're launching like this series, you know, about fundraising. Would you be up for recording with me like an entire like pitch session where essentially I would send you the pitch in advance, like the pitch deck. Then during like whatever time it takes, we will have like a session where you can ask all your questions about the companies, the metrics, whatever you like. And we record everything because we want to document the step-by-step process. And we are announcing that we are raising like $20 million. So she said, yeah, of course, sounds like a lot of fun, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
a gutsy ask, you know, because a lot of investors, even a lot of customers aren't into that kind of, you know, they're like, no, I don't want my stuff recorded. There might be something proprietary said here, right? So that's a very gutsy ask, I must say.
Yeah, and I was like, because I was telling her, you know, like, because she also is like really like pro transparency. So I told her, you know, like it's a huge market. Like we have tons of investment like coming in every single year, but no one knows what's the behind the scenes, and no one knows like the real metrics, the real question. And I think it would be beneficial both from the VC side and also from the entrepreneur side that everyone knows, you know, like what are these questions, so people are well prepared, and in the end it will serve everyone. So she was like, yeah, of course, sounds interesting. And then I sent her the pitch, and then she was like, ooh, the metrics have changed a lot, you know, like in the last months. It's crazy. Like I'm really like amazed by how you can keep growing like this, etc. So I was like, okay, thank you. And then, you know, like during the pitch, like she really digged into our metrics, etc. And then for her, it was it was definitely like a company she was interested in. It was really something she wanted like to basically like do an offer. And then once she did an offer, I was, you know, like, I was like, okay, before we say no publicly, I'm gonna, because like Pascal was super kind to already like do all of this, I wanted to tell her, okay, Pascal, we're gonna say no. Is that okay with you if we said it publicly, just to make sure that, you know, like we're not hurting her feelings or whatever, and that everything is clear and transparent? And she said, you know, like, you win some, you lose some, and it's fine. Like, we have a good relationship. I think it was nice. The video of the pitch, you know, like, was live, and she already had tons of her friends saying it's really an amazing video, and VCs from France were reaching out to her also to potential partner on some other deals. So, you know, it brought her like also a lot of attention and also a lot of potential visibility. So she was happy with that. But then instead, you know, of saying no to the $20 million offer, I thought like, okay, we start receiving already a lot of messages and emails from VCs. So instead of saying no directly, I'm just going to say we received a $20 million term sheet at a $100 million valuation. And because we're receiving a lot of messages from VCs, we're just going to wait a bit, like 1 week, to decide whether or not what we're going to do. I was not saying whether or not we're going to say no, but it was more like,
wait, let me back up for a second. So you got, I think you, unless I misheard, I think you kind of glossed over the fact that your valuation was $100 million. Can you say more on that? Like, yeah, I don't even know what valuation you were going in to begin with, but did it increase in the pitch process?
No, it was, to be honest, it was, we were saying like, okay, we're going to raise 20 million at basically $100 million valuation. So it's like 20% for 20% of the company. Yeah.
And no one was turned off by that? Because that's pretty, I mean, and granted, you've done millions in revenue at that point, but that's still a pretty sizable valuation, right?
Yeah, definitely. But the truth is, so when it comes to valuation, you have like, obviously like tons of parameters to take into account. In our case, the markets, our competitors have raised like almost 300 millions. So the valuation are already like super high, and the market size has already been, you know, like estimated at like tons of billions. So it's like, okay, they know that valuation can go high. And the fact that we're in hypergrowth really is something, you know, that VCs, they have a lot of money right now. So valuation is never really the issue. And in our case, it kind of like made sense based on all our metrics. So once we received that, so essentially like to kind of recap, first step was announcing publicly that we were going to raise. Then we had the pitch meeting that was live recorded with Pascal. Then we started receiving like a lot of messages from VCs because they could have a look into our metrics, etc. So they were getting more and more excited. And even from the day we announced, we were starting receiving, let's say, like tens of messages. After the pitch, it was more like close to 100 emails. And eventually, like, we received like the $20 million like offer and the term sheet. In that case, once we announced it, then it went totally crazy. I received like LinkedIn messages, Facebook messages, WhatsApp, cold calls, text message from investors, and okay.
Then so you hadn't given a decision yet. You had just publicly announced we have received a term sheet for 20 million at 100 million valuation.
Yeah, exactly.
And this investor was okay with that, even though you hadn't signed anything yet. They were okay that you put that information out there.
Yeah. It was fine. It was okay, and they were okay with it. And then we received a new offer that was a $30 million offer without having to meet with these actual investors. Like, they knew a lot because essentially, like, the truth is, like, these investors were coming from an intermediary, like someone who sourced deals for them.
Sure, yeah.
And that guy, I kind of like knew him. So he interviewed me in one of his podcasts, and then we had a chat on like multiple times because he's also an entrepreneur. And he knew the deal was hot. And these guys, which are like a private equity fund, they were really like, they trusted that person. Like, they were really like, okay, like, I know that if you find a deal that's hot, we go on it, you know, it's fine. And so they worked out like, I think it was like 50 pages of everything related to like our customers, the market, our competitors, market analysis. Like, they did really an amazing job. But what was crazy with the offer was that it was like $30 million but $15 million was in cash outs. Meaning like it was $5 million for me, my co-founder, and just me and my co-founders.
So they wanted to buy the business from you? Like they wanted you to... Oh, okay.
No. It was basically like $15 million for the company and $15 million directly in our pockets. And essentially they would take...
They were just literally like funding you as individual, like basically like you were getting a $5 million salary, or a bonus paid out to yourself.
Exactly. And they would get like, maybe it was 35% of the company. So it was like a bigger chunk of the company because we were doing a lot of cash outs, but they were like investing like a larger amount. So
okay, so many questions here. And I got to ask them quickly because we're running out of time. But okay, so $30 million offer, 5 million of which you and your co-founders each get 5 million just to have for yourselves. So you'd be basically set for life, or at least a good portion of your life.
Yeah.
You could probably retire or at least go on like a 5-year sabbatical if you wanted to. And the rest of it goes into the company. Now they take a little bit more equity, 35%, I think you said. All right. So that's a pretty wild scenario. I've got 2 questions here. And the only thing is we got to go through them quickly because we're running out of time. Question 1, what did the first investor who was putting in 20 million, who thought they had you with that, and they were 20 million at 20%, what did they think? Question 2, what's going through your mind when you are told we are going to deposit $5 million into your pocket, not your company's pocket, but your pocket?
So to answer your second question first, I didn't sleep. Because we were not expecting such an offer. And as you said, like it's life-changing amounts. So I was like, okay, like what's the best decision? And it will basically answer like your first question, because I actually called Pascal and we spent like 2 hours on the phone together. And I told her like, it's life-changing amount. I don't know what to do, because obviously like we would keep the control of the company, but we will still have an investor, which we don't want to, because for the team, it would be different. It would be a different way of operating everything. And then, she basically told me like, right now we were between like 4 and 5 million in ARR at that time, I would say, or like 5 million. And she was telling me like, okay, at the end of the year, how much do you plan to do like in ARR? And I was like, okay, we're on the way to do 10 million. And she's like, okay, whenever you're doing 10 million, you're going to get much better offers in 6 months. You don't need the money now. Why are you like stressed about that? Do your own things. And then once you're at 10 million, think, like you would get more. You're not in a rush. And she's like, why are you putting yourself the pressure when actually you're already paying yourself a good salary? You're getting every year like amazing dividends. Your team is happy. And she's like, okay, I'm removing my investor hat. So, okay. And she's like, just keep doing what you do. And she really helped me out, because to be honest, when you get like this, even though like, obviously for me, it was important to show the world that message, because I think like whenever you look at the people who fundraise, obviously it's always the same type of people. So there is almost zero diversity. And eventually, like if you tell people that you need to fundraise to be a successful company, then you close doors to all the people who could think of becoming an entrepreneur, but say like, no, I can't even become an entrepreneur, or I can't even think of becoming an entrepreneur, because you need to raise funds to succeed. If we tell people that you can succeed without funds, then you inspire like a much larger and much broader audience. So I was like, okay, like let's do it. Let's say no. And if eventually it fails, and that's life, and we'll go for another round. But for me, it was okay. But to be honest, I was definitely didn't sleep so well. My co-founders have kids also. So for them, it was a big decision. But okay, we just like sat down.
Yeah, their college was paid for right there. With
of course. But as you said, with 5 million, to be honest, if you're smart enough, with 5 million, you can't stop working for your entire life. Like you put investment in good places, and you're set.
Right. Well, and I think that probably also speaks to you believe in what you're building, right? And it's not so much about personal gain. Personal gain is nice, but the goal is not personal gain. It's to build something that's lasting and that makes an impact and that you care about. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, for me, it's in the end, I asked myself this question because I grew up, with my parents didn't have a lot of money. And then, once I started like earning a lot of money, I was like, my life is going to change. It's going to become like way different, etc. But actually, it doesn't change. I still have my $5 t-shirt. Like I like to eat at the same cheap restaurant with my friends, and it doesn't change. Like I'm the same person. I haven't changed. But what makes me like super happy and what really like drives me is when I see people that, let's say, like I didn't know in the past, I gave them advice, and then eventually they become like successful and they are like growing. They are experiencing the same freedom that I am experiencing, and this what drive me. And I was like, okay, fuck it. This is my only focus. I don't want anyone to tell me like what to do or not. And we know what we're doing, and let's keep doing things the way we do it.
This is quite a fascinating story, and I want to head to our wrap up now. Now, what's interesting is, like you mentioned, you documented this journey. So where can our listeners find this journey all the way up to where you turned down the offer?
They can go on YouTube, and I guess we can put the link to the channel. But yeah, it's my name, and that's the channel.
Okay, great. And then aside from the YouTube series, where can listeners find more about lemlist and check it out?
lemlist.com. Everything is on the website, and if they need demos, they can reach out to my sales team on LinkedIn directly.
Great. Now I'm curious to know who is one person who you want to shout out. It could be a coworker, it could be a mentor, a friend, an employee, an advisor.
I think I would say like Maxime Berthelot is French, but I want to shout out to him just because, I think this whole transparency in business came from him. So before launching Lemlist, I actually read one of his articles where he was saying, step by step how they got, I think that their first 10 customers, and he was detailing the entire process of how they set up ads, etc., and how much money they were making, how much they were spending. And then I was like, it was really inspiring for me. I was like, this is what I want to do. And eventually, when we got our first customers, I decided to blog about it. Then when we got bigger and bigger and bigger, I was always blogging about it. And I think it's so nice because every time I write an article, I have tens of people messaging me about how inspired they are. And I think this is part of life, the more you share, the more, you will grow personally and help grow others, the happier I get. And for me, that's my goal in life.
Great. Now we'll do our top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on our discussion today. I'll go first and I'll toss it to you. The topic today was the story of G and his company Lemlist rejecting a $30 million investment offer. My big lesson that I've taken from our conversation is you have to fundamentally know why you want to raise money. You can't just say, I'm raising money because I need to raise money. There has to be a core driving reason behind that. And then also, as it pertains to the idea of paying yourself, also just really know what you're in it for. And if you're in it for personal gain, it's not bad, but just be honest with yourself. What are you trying to do with this money? And are you looking for a cash out and to move on to something else? Or are you looking to build something that lasts, and that should influence your decision-making? G, top 1 or 2 lessons for the listeners?
I think, I'm going to bounce back on what you said. I would say that, knowing the reason why you're doing things is super important, but don't be too harsh on yourself. It can take time. In the early days, of Lemlist, I didn't have the same mission as I have now. I think ambition is like appetite. It goes it goes step by step. Some people have a lot of ambition when they start, and usually those people have a lot of ambition because they were close to ambitious people. So you would see a lot of people who have grown up in rich families. For them, the baseline of what you can achieve is already super high. If your parents are making millions every year, you would think that as an adult, you should make millions. So when you grow up in a family that don't have a lot of money, for you, your baseline is much lower, and your ambition can be also much lower. So don't be too harsh on yourself. It would go step by step. In our case, in the early days, my number 1 goal when I launched Lemlist was I need to be able to pay myself an okay salary. And now it has totally changed. We want to be like the first Bootstrap unicorn in France, etc. So, like it has came with the years and with experience. So don't be too harsh on yourself and just do it.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show. G, fill in the blank. Entrepreneurship is blank.
For me, entrepreneurship is about helping other people finding, their true self and true freedom.
Say more on that.
I think, but it's really my own personal definition, but for me, being an entrepreneur is not about finding a solution to a problem and helping, it's in everything you do as an entrepreneur, you would help people, whether it's your employees or your customers, do things in a different way that they were doing before. And then, for me personally, I want the people I work with to feel that freedom, to feel that they own every single topic they're working on. And I want our customers and clients to be successful in what they do so they can feel that freedom of, I'm growing my business, I'm helping my business grow, and things are working.
Great. Thank you, G, for joining today. He is G Mobeche, founder and CEO of lemlist. Thank you so much for joining today and sharing your story on Startup Hypeman, the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Rajiv. It was an amazing time.
That wraps up today's conversation. Did you like what you heard? Startup Hypeman, the podcast, is available on every major platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and more. So be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and leave a rating and review. Do you want to be an upcoming guest on the show? Email media@startuphypeman.com with your idea, and my team will review. Our theme song is Change the Game by Jay-Z, all rights owned by Rockefeller and Def Jam Records. And hey, if you want to work together on making your startup story the only one that matters, email me at rajiv@startuphypeman.com. That's RAJIV@startuphypeman.com. Well, that'll do it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you to today's guests for joining. You have been checking out Startup Hypeman, the podcast. I'll catch you next week. But in the meantime, word up, raise up.